Florida has always sold a simple promise: sunshine, opportunity, and one of the friendliest tax environments in the United States. No state income tax, a flourishing tourism economy, and a population boom that has made the state a magnet for retirees, corporations, and families leaving high-tax states. But now a new debate has opened inside Florida's government, one that could redefine the financial model of the entire state and possibly reshape national tax politics. At the centre of this debate is a headline-grabbing question. Will Florida become the first state in America to have both no income tax and no property tax for homeowners? This idea has captured the attention of voters, analysts, and national media. But beneath the dramatic headlines lies a more complicated and far more contentious story. Florida's entire property tax system is worth roughly $61 billion a year, money that funds schools, counties, cities, infrastructure, water management, and emergency services. That massive tax base is the reason this debate is so explosive. But the current political fight in Tallahassee is not actually over eliminating all property taxes. It is over something much narrower: whether Florida should abolish non-school property taxes for homesteads, a targeted slice of the system worth around $11 billion. And that targeted proposal has now triggered a very public feud between Governor Ron DeSantis and House Speaker Daniel Perez. A feud that is shaping up to be one of the most consequential political battles in Florida ahead of the 2026 ballot. To understand the stakes, you first have to understand the structure of property taxes in Florida. The $61 billion collected statewide each year does not flow to the governor's office. It goes to thousands of local governments and districts. Roughly half of that money funds Florida's K-12 public schools. The rest, around $30 billion, supports counties, municipalities, sheriff's offices, fire departments, libraries, parks, and water districts. When voters hear property tax cut, they often imagine a single number on their annual bill. In reality, their property taxes pay for some of the most basic local services they use every day. That is what makes any reform extremely complicated. Eliminating all property taxes would require replacing the entire $61 billion system, an idea that no lawmaker has formally proposed. The current legislative conversation is not about replacing the full $61 billion, but rather a portion of it, the part that funds counties and municipalities through non-school property taxes on homestead properties. According to estimates from the Florida Policy Institute, eliminating this slice would create an $11 billion revenue gap, specifically $7.8 billion for counties and $3 billion for cities. It is a change large enough to force major restructuring, but small enough to appear politically possible. And this is where the conflict between DeSantis and the House begins. Governor Ron DeSantis has spent months expressing support for giving homeowners meaningful property tax relief. But he insists that the relief must be done through a single, clear constitutional amendment on the 2026 ballot. An amendment simple enough to win 60% of the vote, the threshold required to change the Florida Constitution. The governor has made clear for months that he wants to provide property tax relief for those with homestead properties, and that can only be achieved by placing such a measure on the ballot via constitutional amendment. The most likely way that will happen is by having the legislature create and approve a proposal that gets 3/5 support from both the House and Senate to be placed on the November 2026 ballot. Then 60% of the public must vote for it to become law. This marks the second time that DeSantis has zinged House Republicans. After they offered 7 separate proposed constitutional amendments to reduce property taxes earlier this month, DeSantis dismissed their offers as not serious. He doubled down on those comments on Wednesday. Total half measures. Just understand what they're trying to do in the Florida House. They put out a bunch of proposals, he said. There's not one proposal that would get people excited about. Not one. So they're total half measures, which is not what people are asking for. People want to be bold. So just write, there's a problem. But they say, no, we're just going to put it all out to let the people decide. We'll put 5 on the ballot and let the people decide. First of all, the Senate's not going to do that. But if that were to be done, that is a way to kill any type of getting property tax reform. Because different voters are going to read different things, and none of them are going to end up getting 60%. The governor's message has been consistent. One amendment, written plainly with no confusion. However, earlier this month, House Speaker Daniel Perez unveiled a completely different approach. 7 different proposed constitutional amendments, each representing a different model of property tax reduction. Perez's argument is that voters should choose for themselves what model they prefer, and multiple options give the public more democratic choice. DeSantis sees this as sabotage. At a recent appearance at the University of South Florida in Tampa, the governor sharply criticized the House's strategy. He said, "What you don't do is put 5 constitutional amendments on there. They're going to be written in ways that are not going to be clear." His argument is straightforward. Too many choices will confuse voters, split the vote, and ensure that none of the amendments reach the 60% threshold needed for passage. DeSantis called the House's proposals not serious, milquetoast, and total half measures, claiming that not one of them is bold enough to excite the public or accomplish real reform. He added that the House's strategy appears designed to kill any type of property tax reform by creating voter paralysis. Speaker Perez did not let these comments slide. He responded publicly, arguing that DeSantis had offered no actual written proposal, despite months of criticism. He also claimed that he personally reached out to DeSantis to coordinate on property tax reforms and never received a response. Then Perez escalated. He said that if DeSantis considers eliminating all non-school homestead property taxes, milquetoast, then the governor must actually be proposing to abolish all property taxes, including the portion that funds public schools. That, Perez warned, would blow a $21 billion hole in Florida's education system. This claim was not based on any official proposal from DeSantis. It was a pointed political retort designed to highlight what Perez sees as unrealistic rhetoric from the governor. But it illustrates the stakes of the debate. The House is accusing the governor of criticizing without offering details. The governor is accusing the House of undermining reform by flooding the ballot with competing options. And Florida voters are caught in the middle of a conflict between 2 powerful Republicans who fundamentally disagree on strategy, timing, and the scale of the reform. The legislative process is another critical piece of this story. For any constitutional amendment to appear on the 2026 ballot, it must receive 3/5 support in both the Florida House and Senate. DeSantis has no veto power over what the legislature places on the ballot. That means that if the House and Senate agree on a strategy, whether it's one amendment or multiple, DeSantis cannot stop it. This is why he has taken his message to the public, criticizing the House's approach through press conferences and speeches. His strategy relies on public pressure. Meanwhile, the Senate has given no indication that it supports placing multiple amendments on the ballot, meaning Perez's approach may face internal resistance as well. All of this contributes to a fractured and politically charged environment in Tallahassee. And then there is the public opinion issue. Public opinion polls show Floridians are generally supportive of eliminating or reducing property taxes. A University of North Florida Public Opinion Research Lab survey released on Tuesday of 728 likely voters showed 49% of Floridians supporting the elimination of property taxes for homeowners, with 43% against. While the survey shows a plurality of voters support the idea, it's far from the 60% support required for passage. This means the clarity and simplicity of the ballot language is not a technical issue. It is a central battlefield. Complicated language risks confusing voters. Multiple competing amendments risk splitting the yes votes. Critics warn that without careful drafting, even modest property tax reforms could fail at the ballot box. DeSantis points to two failed constitutional amendments from 2024, one to make school board races partisan, another to repeal public campaign financing, and argues that poor wording contributed to their defeat. His message is that clarity is everything. Perez counters that voters are capable of making informed decisions and that offering multiple choices is not confusing, but empowering. Beyond politics, the core financial question remains unresolved. How do counties and municipalities replace $11 billion if non-school homestead taxes are eliminated? Critics argue that eliminating these taxes will not make the costs magically disappear. They will simply shift onto other groups. Counties could raise sales taxes, utility fees, tourist taxes, or commercial property taxes. They could cut policing, fire services, road maintenance, water management, parks, or libraries. They could reduce funding for emergency response or defer infrastructure projects. Local governments would be forced to make tough decisions, and these consequences would differ from county to county. Wealthy counties might handle the change more easily. Rural or lower-income counties could face significant service cuts. The Florida Policy Institute warns that any significant reduction in property taxes will create a reality of cost shifting, meaning someone must pay either through taxes, fees, or reduced services. Supporters of reform argue that Florida's property tax system places too much pressure on residents, especially those with fixed incomes. They claim that eliminating non-school homestead taxes would help long-term residents stay in their homes, reduce the risk of seniors being priced out by rising taxes, and encourage new families to settle in Florida. They also argue that Florida's economy is strong enough to find alternative revenue sources, and that bold reform now could cement Florida's position as the most tax-friendly state in America. Opponents warn that homeowners may benefit at the expense of renters, businesses, and local services. They argue that property taxes are one of the most stable and predictable revenue sources for local governments, and replacing them with more volatile revenue streams could create long-term instability. What makes this moment particularly consequential is that Florida is not merely debating a tax cut, it is debating the structure, reliability, and philosophy of how local government is funded. The $61 billion property tax base is the foundation of local governance in the state. Even though the current legislative fight targets just $11 billion of that base, the implications could ripple across the entire system. If voters approve a constitutional amendment, Florida would need to fundamentally redesign how counties and cities are funded. If voters reject it, pressure will mount on elected officials to find alternative ways to deliver tax relief without destabilizing essential services. And if the legislature places multiple proposals on the ballot instead of one, the risk increases that none of them pass, leaving the issue unresolved and politically toxic heading into future elections. As 2026 approaches, the battle will intensify. The governor is crafting his own proposal, though he has not yet released it. The House is standing behind its 7-option approach. The Senate's position remains uncertain. And voters are beginning to pay attention as political messaging ramps up. Florida is entering a period where one of the largest tax debates in its history will collide with a presidential-era election cycle, meaning turnout will be high, messaging will be sharp, and the stakes will be enormous. Florida may or may not become the first state with no income tax and no homestead property tax. The title is bold, but the path is narrow. Any proposal must survive inter-party conflict, legislative negotiations, constitutional thresholds, and voter skepticism. But one thing is certain: this debate is reshaping Florida's political landscape. The $61 billion property tax system, the $11 billion non-school homestead proposal, and the 60% voter requirement form the core of the most significant tax reform conversation in the state's modern history. Whether Florida ultimately redefines its identity as a tax-free haven or remains within its current framework will depend on how policymakers navigate the next 18 months and how clearly they communicate the stakes to voters statewide. For more breakdowns from Eureka, like, comment, and subscribe.